back to the farm. It's kind of a gray, yucky day out. So there's not a lot I can do outside, although there's not a lot left to do outside for the year. We still have to harvest potatoes, but that's going to wait for the weekend. I've got to start doing cleanup and things like that. But I still have all those tomatoes I picked last week that I need to do something with. And I just got on a kick for getting some preserving projects done. So Morgan and I ran down to the Amish market and picked up a bunch of supplies for that. One of the supplies I got was some organic ginger, which looks a lot different than the stuff you get at the store. It's a little smaller, kind of lumpier looking, but it still smells just as good. And the nice thing about it is the organic ginger has microbes on it, yeasts and stuff, that the store-bought stuff doesn't. Most store-bought ginger actually gets irradiated to kill any of the microbes on it. But you can take the organic ginger and turn it into what's called a ginger bug. And that's what you saw me doing before. You take half a jar of filtered water. You don't want chlorine in it because that will interfere with the microbes growing. And then you chop up about a quarter cup of organic ginger and add a quarter cup of sugar, sweetener, whatever. And then every day you feed it a tablespoon of ginger and a tablespoon of whatever sweetener you're using. And in the course of a week, that mixture will start fermenting, kind of like sourdough starter. And you treat it just like sourdough starter. You feed it every day, and then you can use it to make ginger beer, to make sodas is what I'm after. You combine half a cup of the ginger bug liquid and 4 cups of fruit juice, bottle it up, let it ferment for a little bit. That carbonates it. You stick it in your fridge and you drink it just like soda. And that's my goal. I'm kind of limited in what I can drink. And so right now I drink a lot of sugar-free drink mix, which I'm not sure is all that great for me. So I want to try doing these probiotic drinks and see how that improves my gut health. I have tried kombucha. I'm not crazy about sour flavors. So I've tried kombucha. I've tried Jun tea, which is kombucha done with green tea instead of black tea. And that was a little better. It was a little more on the sweet side, but it still was too sour for me. So I'm hoping that the ginger bug is going to do it for me. Now I have this one I've been doing for about a week, and you can see not a lot of bubbles. There were some bubbles forming on it, and then they just kind of stopped. So, but I was trying to do this with store-bought ginger. So I may have run into the issue that there just weren't any bugs on there to start the fermentation process. So I've added some of that organic ginger, and I also reduced the sugar water content and topped it up with more filtered water, just because you can get too much sugar in your mix and that will inhibit bacterial growth. So then that's counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. So hopefully changing the feed on this and improving the ginger quality, this will wake up in a couple of days. And then this one that you just saw me make is an experiment that I read about while I was trying to find out why my ginger bug wasn't growing as well as I'd hoped, where somebody made it with honey and said after like 3 days it was going great guns. So we're gonna see how this works, and maybe I'll be taking ginger soda, honey ginger soda, to the next Bee Club meeting. So that's that project. I'm going to put that away, and I'm going to start making, I think I'm going to do a lemon a fermented lemon mixture to go in tea for whenever I start getting sick for the winter. So let's get to work on that. that's that. This is a technique called chung. It comes out of Korean culinary background. And you can do this with any kind of fruit. Basically, you just take equal parts fruit and sugar, and you let it sit and ferment on the counter until all the sugar has dissolved. And some chung take longer to process than others because you want everything to break down really good. But then it makes this lovely rich syrup. Now this is just going to sit for a couple of days, is my understanding that this is how long this needs to sit. And then once all those sugars are dissolved and absorbed into the lemon, I'll put it back in that jar that they did not fit in. And store it in the fridge for the winter, so anytime I feel a tickle coming on, I can just throw a spoonful of that in some hot tea or even just hot water and get a soother for my throat. I'd like to experiment sometime with doing that with honey, but let's see how this works out first. That's the easy stuff. Now, the hard stuff is the 5-gallon buckets of tomatoes that I still haven't done anything with. And today's the day I'm going to start getting some stuff done with it. First up, I am going to make a green tomato pie filling, and I've talked to you about that before. One of the things I picked up were all the golden raisins that need to go in it, even though I don't like raisins that much, but the recipe calls for them, so we're going to go with the recipe the first time and then see if I can get rid of them the next time. My one problem with that is I have cracked the top of my glass stove. I knew I did not like glass surface stoves for many reasons, primarily because I'm used to cooking on gas, and it's a lot easier to be consistent on gas. And it's a very expensive repair, unfortunately. The parts have been ordered. We're just waiting for them to come in. And in the meantime, I have gone to Plan B, which is I purchased an induction surface stove. Now, if you haven't used induction before, which I hadn't before the house fire, it's actually a very cool device that the surface only gets hot in the presence of a magnetic pot. So it's a magnetic induction. And so the coils in this respond to the magnetic pull of whatever pot is on it, and that somehow generates the heat. Don't ask me about the science of it. I don't know. I just know that the hotel that we stayed in after the fire had induction stove surfaces, but did not have induction-friendly pans. So I could not cook in the suite at the hotel. I thought the apartment we were moving into also had induction stove surfaces, so I bought a full set of induction pots and pans at the time. Well, then it turned out, no, it was just glass surface stove, so I didn't need the fancy pots and pans, but I love the fancy pots and pans, so I'm not going to complain. And now I have pots and pans that will work on this. Whoop, it's a little touchy. That will work on this stove surface. Other things that will work on it are cast iron, so all my cast iron pans will work on it. Yes, they need cleaning, shush. Any steel pots and pans, as long as they're magnetic, will work on an induction stove. And in fact, the stove came with a little refrigerator magnet, so you could test your pots and pans and see which ones would work and which ones don't. The problem is, the thing that does not work are any of my canning pots and pans, which is problematic on two fronts. One, the biggest pot that I have for making 7 quarts of tomato pie filling is my canner, my pressure canner. And then I have to steam can them my steam canner is aluminum. That does not work on induction. So I have a couple of options, and I'm probably going to go with the more stupid one. I do have a couple of propane gas camping stoves, so I could use those outside, because you don't want to be burning propane in the house without proper ventilation. It's raining, and I don't want to deal with that. So the stove has one burner. This, my favorite burner. Everybody has a favorite burner. What's your favorite burner? The front left burner on this stove is not cracked. It is not the biggest burner. That's the one that is the primary crack. And I know what cracked it, or I'm pretty sure I know what cracked it. And it was when I was canning the salsa. Remember when I was canning the salsa? Maybe you don't, because I wasn't filming then. A couple of weeks ago, I was canning red tomato salsa because I had plenty of red tomatoes and I needed to use them. But I was in an ADHD mood that day, and I wasn't paying attention to the canner the way I should. And it boiled off all the liquid and burnt the canner. And I'm 95% sure that that's also when the surface of the stove cracked. So if I do take this chance, I'm going to have to be right on top of things, paying attention to it the whole time, so that we don't have a repeat of that. You don't usually want to use a cracked glass top stove because the glass can crack further, or if you have boilovers, it can get in and short circuit it. But I figured nothing's going to boil over here, and I'm not going to be cooking at super high heat. So I think I'm okay taking the chance on doing this one project on that one burner. Hopefully the new surface is going to come soon, so I can do some more of this stuff, because I've got like 3 recipes I need to put up. But first and foremost, I've got to get these green tomatoes processed and start making room for other things. So let's clear the surfaces. I got to get Morgan to come empty the dishwasher so I can fill the dishwasher, and we'll get on with the next project.
Start somewhere around 7 or 8. So I am expecting the call. Okay.
Because I am lazy. And I am going to continue to be lazy.
Well, that just tells me that you could
while that's cooking down, I've got one other thing to do with the last of these green tomatoes. That recipe actually used almost all of my green tomatoes. So if I want to do anything else, I've got to go out and pick over what's left in the garden and just see if there's anything I can salvage from that. But I saw this trick on the internet, which we all know how well that works out. But it's an Italian Nonna trick. So I'm going to give it a little bit more credence. And what she does is she takes her green tomatoes and wraps them up in paper like a piece of candy, she said. That's a terrible Italian accent, but. And she just wraps them up in paper and puts them in a box, or she said you can put it in a bag or whatever you want. And you put them in storage for the winter. And in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they will have ripened and you can use them. Now, I don't know how well this is going to work, but that's what experiments are for. So we are going to experiment with some of the biggest of the ones that were in that bucket. You probably saw me in the video swapping out some, unless I cut that out or forgot to turn the camera on when I was doing that. So I got some in here that are nice and big. And some that are just kind of medium big, but get these wrapped up and put them in the basement and see how it goes. So there's a whole box full of tomatoes. We'll see how they do over the next few months and if I'm getting to have fresh tomatoes out of the garden in January and February. So there's 7 jars done. I've got one more back in the steam canner. I have stood over it pretty much the whole time to make sure that I didn't do any more damage to the stove. So Josh came in while I was working on this and said, "Are you cooking apples?" So I'm like, "No, I'm cooking green tomatoes." And he said, "That's too bad. I don't like either apples or green tomatoes." But it smelled like apples, so then it's doing exactly what we wanted it to do. I'm pooped. It's 9:30. I've been doing this for 6 hours now, and I'm ready to be done. But I've got a bucket of peppers that still need to be dealt with, and I still have to go through the bucket of ripe tomatoes and get those sorted out to storage and to ripening. So I will see you back here tomorrow.